Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes the mind doesn't whisper, it screams. It trembles beneath the weight of thoughts that feel too big, too fast, too strange to belong to you. A sense of fragmentation sets in, a spiraling unease, a trembling suspicion that you're losing grip on reality. The world continues to move as if nothing is wrong, and yet, inside you, everything is shifting, and that's where it begins. The silent question, the whispered fear, am I going crazy? But before you accept that label, pause. Because what you might be experiencing isn't madness, it's a message. Beneath the chaos of your thoughts, beneath the emotional tension, beneath the uneasiness in your bones, there is something trying to surface. Something real, something vital. The modern world, in its obsession with surface-level stability, has taught us to treat every disruption as dysfunction. But what if the disruption is actually a deeper kind of intelligence calling out for your attention? Most people spend their lives anesthetized to their inner world. They live in noise, in distraction, in routine. But you are no longer able to do that. Your inner world has broken the surface, and now you feel everything. The sadness that has been buried, the questions that have been silenced, the parts of yourself that you've abandoned just to be accepted. The breaking you feel isn't the breaking of sanity. It's the cracking of illusion. The tearing away of false layers. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. And that is precisely the dilemma. You were handed a mold, a way to behave, to think, to live. And maybe you wore it well for a while. Maybe you even convinced yourself it was who you really were. But now, it no longer fits, and your psyche knows it. And when the psyche becomes too cramped within the limits of your constructed identity, it does not ask politely. It disrupts. The anxiety you feel, the confusion, the sense that something inside is fracturing. These are not signs that you're defective. They are signs that your soul is revolting against a life that is too small for it. They are cries from the unconscious saying, "Look here, feel this, don't turn away." You are being called inward, and the call, though painful, is sacred. The great mistake we make is assuming that mental disturbance always equals disease. But what if it also means evolution? What if your breakdown is not the end of your sanity, but the beginning of your transformation? There is a fierce kind of wisdom in the psyche. It knows what the conscious mind refuses to face. It knows that pretending, pleasing, performing will never bring peace, and when that performance has gone on for too long, the unconscious must intervene. You see, your mind is not betraying you. It is trying to return you to yourself. But that return is not quiet. It rattles the bones, it scrapes away all that is inauthentic. It strips your identity to its core. That is why it feels like falling apart, because in truth you are disintegrating. But not into madness, into awareness, into truth, into contact with something deeper than you've ever known. And that truth often comes in strange clothing, nightmares, panic attacks, emotional floods. Silence so heavy it feels deafening, but each symptom is not random. It's communication. The unconscious doesn't speak in rational words. It speaks in metaphor, in archetype, in dream, and in dread. And if you learn to listen to these strange languages, you begin to see. This isn't the collapse of your mind. It is the call of your soul. Most people are never taught to hear that call. They're taught to silence it, numb it, fear it. But you, because you are here now, feeling what you're feeling, have already begun a different journey, a journey of facing what others flee, of questioning what others accept, of confronting what lies beneath the surface of your life. And that confrontation, terrifying as it may be, is what leads to healing, not quick fixes, not pretending everything is okay, but truth, depth, meaning, and that's what this message is about. Your symptoms are signals. Your fear is a threshold. Your confusion is a map waiting to be read. You are not malfunctioning. You are being awakened. And though the process may be disorienting, what lies on the other side is not insanity. It is integration. Your mind is not the enemy. It is the gateway to something profoundly real, something ancient, something whole. There comes a moment when the self you've always known begins to vanish. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts subtly, like a distant echo you can't place. A growing sense that the way you used to think, the roles you used to play, the ambitions you used to chase, they no longer belong to you, and then something deeper begins to shift. You look in the mirror, and though your face is the same, the person behind your eyes feels like a stranger. You don't know if you're falling apart or waking up, and the truth is, it's both. What most people fear as insanity is often the very process of psychological growth. But that growth doesn't feel beautiful. It feels like death, because it is the death of the ego, the constructed self, the mask you wear for the world, is terrified of its own irrelevance. It clings to old labels. It panics when the story begins to change, and when your life enters a phase of deep inner transformation. The ego doesn't go quietly. It kicks, it screams, it calls this unraveling a threat. It whispers in your ear that you're losing your mind. But you are not losing your mind, you are shedding a false identity, and that is a sacred process. No one tells you that awakening often begins in confusion, that clarity first requires the dismantling of the old structure. The beliefs that once served you now feel suffocating. The habits that once gave you comfort now bring you anxiety. The people who once validated your existence now feel like ghosts from a former life. And that hollow ache that follows you through the day, that quiet unrest, is not a malfunction. It is the echo of the ego as it loses its grip. In those moments of disorientation, the rational mind tries to make sense of it all. But logic cannot interpret what is being born inside you, because what's emerging is not coming from the intellect, it's coming from the self, the deeper, eternal part of you that has waited, patiently, beneath all the noise, for this very moment. And when the self rises, the ego trembles, not because you're broken, but because something more complete is awakening. Carl Jung knew this well. He understood that the path to individuation, the process of becoming your true, whole self, often begins with a psychological collapse. But this collapse is not destruction. It is reorganization. It is the dissolving of the outer shell so that the inner essence can emerge, and it is almost always accompanied by fear, because you are stepping into the unknown. You are walking away from the familiar scripts. You are choosing to meet the parts of yourself that were long buried beneath the expectations of the world. What makes this journey so terrifying is that it doesn't come with a manual. There is no clear timeline, no promises, no applause, just silence, space, and a soul that demands truth. And in that space, the ego will try to convince you to turn back. It will offer distractions, comforts, even crises, anything to keep you from stepping beyond its control. But the more you resist, the louder the chaos grows, until you finally surrender to the unraveling. And when you do, something strange happens. The fear begins to transform. The emptiness becomes possibility. The silence becomes sacred. You realize you were never going crazy. You were being stripped down so you could remember who you were before the world told you who to be. The ego, though clever, is limited. It is built for survival, not for transcendence. It wants control, not freedom. And so, when the deeper currents of the psyche begin to pull you toward authenticity, the ego feels like it's dying. But what it calls death is actually rebirth. Because underneath every layer of fear is a deeper layer of truth. And that truth is waiting for you to listen. Every time you feel like you're unraveling, you're being invited to let go. To let go of who you think you are. To let go of the masks, the narratives, the defenses. And yes, that process feels like madness, because it disrupts everything the ego built to feel safe. But the paradox is this: only by allowing the ego to dissolve can the real self emerge. The self that is not afraid, the self that is not divided, the self that remembers why it came here in the first place. There comes a time when you begin to question not just the world around you, but the world within you. The discomfort doesn't come from the outside. It begins to brew in the silence of your own thoughts. You catch yourself saying things you don't mean. You feel tension between what you show and what you feel. You smile when you're empty. You nod when you want to scream. And slowly you begin to realize there's a war unfolding beneath the surface of your life. The conflict isn't random. It isn't madness. It's a confrontation between two selves, the one you've carefully constructed and the one you've long suppressed. Most people go their entire lives without ever facing this internal dissonance. They keep moving, keep performing, keep pretending. But you are beginning to hear the cracks. You are starting to feel the pressure of parts of you that want to be seen, but have been pushed into the dark. What you are feeling is not the beginning of insanity. It is the arrival of the shadow. Everyone has a shadow. It is not evil. It is not wrong. It is not a flaw in your humanity. The shadow is everything you've rejected, denied, or forgotten about yourself. It's the anger you were told to hide, the sadness you were shamed for, the desires you labeled as unworthy, the instincts you buried to belong. The shadow is not the enemy. It is a part of you that has been exiled in silence, waiting for its moment to return. And when it returns, it does not knock gently. It erupts. It disrupts. It shows up in irrational emotions, intrusive thoughts, sudden rage, emotional numbness, or deep anxiety. You might find yourself reacting in ways that don't feel like you, saying things you don't understand, feeling urges that disturb you. And in those moments, the fear is natural. You begin to wonder, what is wrong with me? Why am I thinking this way? Am I breaking? But what if nothing is wrong? What if what you're experiencing is not deterioration, but integration, because the parts of yourself that you have abandoned do not disappear? They only wait. They gather in the corners of your unconscious, and over time they grow louder. Not to destroy you, but to be remembered. The psyche does not seek perfection. It seeks wholeness, and wholeness cannot exist without the shadow. What we repress does not die. It transforms. It disguises itself. It creeps into our relationships, our dreams, our decisions. You may think you're in control, but if you do not face your shadow, it will find other ways to be seen. And often, those ways feel chaotic. They feel like self-sabotage, but they are only symptoms of a deeper need. A need to be real, to be seen, to be complete. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means we don't grow by pretending to be pure. We grow by embracing the complexity within us, and that complexity includes contradiction. It includes darkness. It includes the very things we've been told to fear. But how can we fear what is already part of us? How can we call ourselves broken for feeling what every human feels? The shame we carry about our own emotions, our own desires, is not natural. It is learned. We were taught to hide what made others uncomfortable. And so we split ourselves. We became polite instead of honest, productive instead of peaceful, strong instead of vulnerable. We chose survival over authenticity, but the soul doesn't forget, and it doesn't give up. That's why, in the quiet hours, those forgotten parts begin to whisper. They show up in the mirror when you're tired of pretending. They emerge in your dreams when the conscious mind finally lets go. They pull at you in your moments of stillness, in those quiet flashes when your heart speaks louder than your thoughts. To face the shadow is not to invite destruction. It is to return to your depth. It is to make space for your humanity. It is to stop fearing the parts of you that feel too wild, too angry, too raw, because those parts are not broken. They are wounded, they are ancient, they are full of life, and the moment you begin to listen to them, not with judgment, but with curiosity, you begin the real work. The work of integration, the work of making peace with yourself. This is not about fixing yourself. This is about becoming honest with yourself. And honesty means acknowledging that you are more than what you show the world. You are not a mask. You are not just light. You are the full spectrum of human experience. Joy and grief, courage and fear, clarity and chaos. The feeling that you're going crazy often arises when the shadow knocks too loudly to be ignored, when everything starts to fall apart. Your certainty, your roles, your direction. It can feel like you're sinking into a vast and endless void. You can't explain it. You can't rationalize it. Nothing outside of you has necessarily changed, but inside, it's like the floor of your reality is collapsing. You no longer feel like yourself. The goals that once motivated you seem meaningless. The routines feel empty, the conversations superficial, you're drifting, disconnected, and you don't know how to get back to the person you were before. But what if you're not meant to return? What if this feeling of being lost is not a mistake, but a milestone? What if this isn't an emotional breakdown, but the beginning of a psychological breakthrough? The path you are on, though frightening, is not one of descent into madness. It is the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. Not perfect, whole, and that distinction is everything. Individuation is not a spiritual fantasy, nor is it a philosophical ideal. It is the deepest psychological reality of the human being. It is the process through which the conscious and unconscious mind begin to communicate, to cooperate, to integrate. It's the path of alignment between what you think, what you feel, and what you are. And this path does not begin with clarity. It begins with confusion, because the first stage of awakening is the death of who you thought you were. We spend so much of our lives constructing a self that fits into society, into family systems, into expectations. We create identities around our jobs, our relationships, our history, and then one day it no longer fits, not because something is wrong, but because you have outgrown it. That tension you feel is the soul expanding beyond the limitations of the ego. And expansion, though necessary, is always uncomfortable, because it demands surrender. To individuate is to stop living according to a borrowed script. It is to question everything you were taught to be. It is to walk away from what is familiar, not because it is bad, but because it is no longer true, and that truth isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It waits for silence, and once you begin to hear it, you cannot unhear it. It calls you back to yourself, and that call will not stop until you answer. But answering that call means facing everything you've ignored. It means turning inward instead of outward. It means sitting in the quiet and asking the questions that scare you. Who am I without the mask? Who am I without the approval? What remains if I let go of everything that isn't mine? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary ones, because the self cannot emerge until the false self begins to dissolve. And that dissolution is what you are feeling, that hollow, disoriented space inside you. That is not emptiness. It is the clearing, the space being made for what is real, for what is uniquely, deeply, undeniably you. Jung understood that the psyche longs for unity, not sameness, not control, but inner harmony, a state in which the fragments of the self are no longer at war, a state in which the conscious mind no longer denies the wisdom of the unconscious, a state where instinct and insight, logic and emotion, shadow and light can coexist. That is the goal of individuation, not to become better, but to become whole. And on this journey, you will not be handed a map. There are no universal steps, no timelines, no guarantees, because the path is not external. It's carved within you, moment by moment, choice by choice. It asks for honesty, for humility, for courage. And most of all, it asks for presence, not the kind of presence you perform, but the kind that listens deeply, fearlessly, intimately. You will begin to notice small shifts, the way you speak to yourself. The things you no longer tolerate, the emotions you no longer suppress, the relationships you begin to question, these are not random, they are signals, indicators that the inner self is rising, that the illusion is cracking, that your soul is reclaiming space, and though it may feel like the old world is fading away, something new is being born in its place, something quieter, something wiser, something that doesn't need validation to feel real. This is not something you force, it is something you allow. You allow the dismantling, you allow the discomfort, you allow the unknown, because on the other side of that unknown is not madness, it is meaning. You said, Write a conclusion of entire script, ChatGPT said. Absolutely. Here's the conclusion to your full motivational psychology script, written in the same Carl Jung inspired tone, emotionally rich and reflective, crafted to leave the viewer with deep resonance and a sense of quiet empowerment. So if you've been wondering what's happening to you, if your days feel heavy and your nights feel endless, if you feel like you're unraveling from the inside out, know this: you are not going crazy, you are coming alive. The chaos you feel is the psyche reorganizing itself. The discomfort is the ego loosening its grip. The fear is the shadow rising to be seen, and the confusion is the self. The deeper, wiser self emerging from the depths, ready to lead. This is not madness. This is metamorphosis. You are not broken, you are becoming, you are not lost, you are being redirected, and no matter how isolated, how misunderstood, how disoriented you may feel, this process is sacred. It is ancient, it is human. You are not here to live a life that fits someone else's mold. You are here to become who you truly are, beneath the masks, beyond the roles, and through the fire of transformation. Let the world call it what it wants. Let your doubts echo as they will. But remember deep in your bones what is true. You are not going crazy. You are waking up. You are healing. You are home.